Well, have we got some juicy news that's happened this week? Yes, at Alphatauri, Nyck de Vries has been replaced by the honey badger himself, Daniel Ricciardo. Yes, it's the story of Nick and Rick. I kind of like that. We all love Daniel Ricciardo. I'm pretty sure he's always got a smile on his face. In fact, it's very hard to see a photo of him without a smile on his face. And Nyck de Vries has not had the greatest weeks of seasons, so it was sort of expected, but um, still is always a shock whenever there is a driver transfer that happens midway through the season. So what I thought we'd do is I thought we'd look at each driver in particular. So Danny Rick joining, Nyck de Vries leaving, and sort of look at it in a little bit more detail as to who it might affect, what the reasons for it are, and things like that. First things to mention is um, I think I'm both sad and glad. I am sad that Nyck de Vries has lost his seat because he is a quality driver, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And I'm happy that Daniel Ricciardo has joined because absolutely fantastic quality driver, and one of the only drivers that I've ever known that's actually challenged Verstappen in equal machinery, and not exactly come off second best easily in that. So it's worth talking about that as well. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with Danny Rick because that's the most obvious one. I think you guys are always already ahead of me as to where we're going to be going on that. But we will also focus on Nyck de Vries, which I've got my own 2 cents to say on that as well. So that will be cool. So let's start off with Danny Rick himself. Now, Daniel has had a couple of rough years. I mean, it was November last year he was driving for McLaren, and it didn't go that well for him, did it? Really struggled, and it was a bit of a surprise. I mean, to see um, him do well at Red Bull, do well at Renault, getting a podium, and then just completely drop off at McLaren was it was a surprise. It was a shock. Um, Now, has he lost his touch? I do not think so at all. Now we've had the first of the two practices at the Hungarian Grand Prix. He's now got his feet under the dash. And in terms of the times, nothing to really, let's say, shout about. If I'm being honest, I don't think so anyway. Um, because it just you can't really judge it on one on one session on practice. I mean, how much do you get from it? But I do think he is still a quality driver that deserves to be in Formula One. I mean, the only thing that was sad for Ricciardo was the fact that there's about 25, 30 drivers that deserve to be in Formula One. But that is how it is. But I don't think he's lost his touch, and I think actually an Alphatauri Toro Rosso style car, I think it'll be in the style that will suit him. I think the McLaren was just a different style that didn't work for him, so I think that's going to be good. And just to see him back driving again and back doing what he loves. Simulator work is the boring part of Formula One. Actually, racing is the exciting part of Formula One. So good on him. Good on him. But of course, for Daniel Ricciardo being in AlphaTauri, the sister team of Red Bull, there is someone who probably is not that happy about the news. Checo. Sergio Perez. Now, this one is a tricky one. I firstly can say I am sad to see Sergio Perez struggling so much recently. Just think about where he's come from, how he's got here. You know, he started off at McLaren. He did okay. He moved to Sauber, I want to say, and did okay. Force India was an absolute beast. Let's not forget he was a race winner whilst at Force India. What was it? Last to first in the Bahrain Sakir Grand Prix. Absolutely, he is a quality driver. He deserves to be in Formula One, as I say. So do 25 other drivers. But he's under a bit of pressure at the moment, isn't he? Again, a bit of a surprise considering the fact that at the start of the season he was contending with Max Verstappen, giving him a hard time. But what on earth has happened? No one. I think we're all mystified as to what's happening with Sergio. The racing is okay, but he's struggling to qualify. It doesn't make sense. And then the situation in practice today where we weren't even 2 minutes into first practice and he binned it in the wall. And not due to a mechanical problem, due to what a lot of people are describing as a bit of a rookie error. It's a little bit worrying. Now, does Daniel Ricciardo joining Alphatauri mean that Sergio Perez's future is in doubt? Well, sadly, yes. Even if Red Bull say it's not, because of one huge thing: media. The media in Formula One has this tendency to try and join the dots. And they might not be right to start off with, but just them trying to join the dots ends up affecting the people that are part of it. I have no doubt in my mind that the F1 media have probably been asking Christian Horner and Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo and Helmut Marko and everyone at Red Bull, what do you think about the Daniel Ricciardo move? Does this affect Sergio Perez? And I'm sorry, when you start asking those questions regularly, of course it's going to affect them because you know the pressure's on, right? Like, if imagine this situation if in terms of work, right? If you were, I don't know, the boss of a team or a senior in a team, and there's someone that's been brought onto the team who's doing well, who's doing smartly, and everything like that, you're probably not going to think too much of it, are you? But what if then people around was like going, "Oh, so and so's doing well. Are you worried for your job? Are you worried for your job?" Now, the first couple of times, you're probably not going to think about it too much, but at some point, you're going to go, "Why are they asking so many questions about this? Is my future under threat? Do I need to try harder? Do I need to push harder? Do I need to be a bit more forceful? Be a more, you know?" And all that's going to do is going to stop you from being you. It's one of the sad things about the media in F1, which it is what it is. It's just part and parcel, and the guys are paid millions of pounds in the drivers, so they have to deal with it. But Sergio Perez is not driving like Sergio Perez right now because of the questions that are being asked about his future. It does affect him. Now, where do I see this in terms of the future? Can I see a situation where Daniel Ricciardo gets promoted to Red Bull? Yes, I can. And no one knows how it's going to happen because Verstappen's been talking about potentially retiring as well. I mean, could be BS. I don't know. But no matter what happens in terms of Sergio Perez maybe being demoted or being kicked out of the team entirely, Verstappen leave, I don't know, but I can see Ricciardo at Red Bull. And if he was in the same team as Verstappen, I could see him providing an equal battle. And if he was in the Red Bull with Sergio Perez, I could see him being the lead driver. So that's Daniel Ricciardo out of the way. Sergio Perez, could I see him losing his seat at Red Bull? Sadly, yes. And for Sergio, it provides a bit of a rougher situation for him. Think about the last Red Bull drivers that we had that have been through this sort of transition. Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Daniel Kvyat, they've all been already part of the Red Bull drivers program. So what's that meant? That when they got kicked out of the team, the Red Bull team, they had a drive at Toro Rosso, Alphatauri. They basically swapped with whoever the Alphatauri driver was going to be. I don't know why, but I can't see Sergio Perez at Alphatauri. I just can't. And that's a scary prospect because we're almost back to the situation when he was at Racing Point before it moved to Aston Martin. Is where would he go? Mercedes is full up. I can't see Ferrari getting him. McLaren, Oscar Piastri seems to be doing all right, and so does Lando. Who else? Haas, Magnussen, and Hulken. Maybe Magnussen, so maybe Haas, because I don't think Magnussen's been doing that well. Alfa Romeo, I do think Bottas has gone off the boil, but somehow I can't see that. Alpine, nope. Gasly and Ocon, they look set in stone. Aston Martin, definitely not. Fernando Alonso hasn't burnt that bridge yet. And come on, do you really expect Stroll to lose his seat when he starts in charge? Grow up. Williams, maybe Williams. For an interesting reason. Bear with me on this one. But the options aren't that great for Sergio. Now, in terms of what that means is, where does he go? The one thing I'll say to Perez's credit is he has won the Monaco Grand Prix. Whether you can see where I'm going with this. Could he move to IndyCar? Try and win the Indy 500? Could he move to endurance racing? Try and win the Le Mans, get the Triple Crown? You see, Sergio Perez is actually one of those drivers I can imagine being more of a racing driver than a specialist Formula One driver. I can see him transferring his skills to the LMP categories at Le Mans. I can see him transferring those over to Indy. So that could be an interesting one. Could Sergio Perez try and go for the Triple Crown like Alonso did a few years back? And maybe that could increase his stock. Don't know. But for Sergio Perez, edgy times. Edgy times. So that's those two. But do you know what? A lot of the stories have been around Daniel Ricciardo joining, and not a lot of the stories have been around the fact that Nyck de Vries has lost his seat. And I wanted to do a bit of a piece on that because how would you feel if you're Nyck de Vries? And let's not forget, he has won all the junior Formula One Formula categories. He's won Formula E. And yes, he had a couple of years out, but do not forget the fact that at Williams last year, he did get points finishing in his only race that he performed in. He is a quality driver, but right now it looks like the options he's got are gone. But I want to give a bit of hope to Nyck de Vries and his fans here because, well, I'm not going to say it's similar to Gasly because Gasly chose to leave. He moved to Alpine. But there is a driver who was pretty much dropped from the Alphatauri program. There was someone who struggled at Alphatauri and who's proving to be more of like a Mercedes style driver and in the perfect position for him. You're probably now a little bit ahead of me in knowing where I'm going here. Of course, I'm talking about the tyre whisperer himself, Alex Albon. Let's not forget that Alex, yes, he went and got into Red Bull and he dropped down to Toro Rosso, but or Alphatauri, but he was struggling. He was struggling. And he was pretty much dropped for Yuki Tsunoda. Yes, I mean, there was a part of a deal in terms of getting him. I can't remember how the deal worked, but but he sort of had a bit of a difficult time when nothing seems to be going right for him. And yet, it wasn't his fault. I mean, he was bundled into by Hamilton so many times accidentally, I'm sure. And that is what it is. But Alex was in a difficult situation, and now look at him. Now the similarities between these two is incredible because you've got two drivers who have, you could argue, performed better when they were at Williams than they did at Alphatauri. Now, I'm not going to start talking about people losing their jobs, but I could see these two being a pairing at Williams. I could. And I think if they were a pairing at Williams, they would be well matched for each other. Now, I do like Logan Sargent. I do like the way he is, and I do think he is a quality driver. But we need to obviously get Nyck for his seat because he is a young driver. And he's young and everything like that. But there is hope. Here we have. Well, let's look at the stats. Here we have a driver who has tested pretty much every car in the Mercedes catalogue. Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and he's driven in races. It's going to be very interesting. Now, I want to talk about one other driver as well that is probably going to start thinking, wow, what an opportunity, as well as Daniel Ricciardo. And that is Yuki Tsunoda. Now, I've not done a picture for Yuki Tsunoda because I've literally just thought about it right now. But let's think about how Yuki is right now. Now, everybody knows that Daniel Ricciardo is a quality driver. Now, when McLaren got Ricciardo, and then a couple of years later Ricciardo left, whose stock rose in McLaren big time? Was it not Lando's? Lando Norris went from this, yeah, he's a good driver, to, wow, he's better than Daniel Ricciardo. Now, that might be true, that might be false, but that was starting the perception. Lando Norris started to become from, yes, he's decent, to he is top quality. Now, I think a lot of us can see Yuki Tsunoda as being decent with a little bit of immaturity about him because he's young. That's how it is. He has the opportunity to battle and beat a race winner. Someone who's had podiums galore. Someone who has won the Monaco Grand Prix. Yuki's got an opportunity. Just imagine this as a crazy scenario. Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo are battling, right? And they are nip and tuck pretty much on the same level, right? Max Verstappen fulfills his ridiculous thing to retire. And they're not keen on Sergio Perez. Bring them both up. That could happen. I mean, to be quite honest, the sky's the limit in terms of what Red Bull do with the drivers. What I will say is it's very interesting to see how quickly Red Bull are starting to go back to the Red Bull family. And I think Red Bull are starting to see that there was a bit of an experiment that went wrong. Just think about this. They had Alex Albon leave the Red Bull family. And Alex Albon has done better. Yuki Tsunoda is part of the Red Bull family and is doing well. Pierre Gasly has left the Red Bull family, and you could say he's doing well for himself. Max Verstappen, part of the Red Bull family, doing well for himself. Sergio Perez was not originally part of the Red Bull drivers program. And let's not forget, by the way, before we start properly badmouthing Sergio Perez, because I'm not a Sergio Perez hater. He has been a top quality driver everywhere he's been. Yes, he's had some struggles, but what driver has not? But it doesn't seem to have fully worked out for him at Red Bull. Nyck de Vries was part of the Mercedes program bringing into Red Bull, and it's not quite worked. So here's a question, and this is for you guys to comment down below on your thoughts here. Can you see Red Bull going back to the Red Bull family? Can you see both seats at Red Bull and both seats at Alphatauri being filled with Red Bull Academy products? Leave you to decide that. But for now, please like, subscribe, and enjoy all the content that we're providing.